In April 2014, Heartbleed hit the headlines. It was a relatively simple coding mistake that threatened to bring the entire internet to its knees, completely undermining the fundamentals of electronic security. But how did it happen? And could it happen again? Welcome back to the Pro Tech Show, the place for tech tips and advice for IT pros and decision makers. If that sounds like your kind of thing, then hit that subscribe button. Today we're looking back at the Heartbleed bug, a relatively simple coding mistake that turned the internet inside out back in 2014. But how did such a little mistake cause such a big impact? Heartbleed was a bit of an oddity. It was one of the first bugs to get a logo and a memorable name. Most bugs were known by their official CVE reference number, Heartbleed's being CVE-2014-0160. Memorable, huh? It started a bit of a trend of bugs with exciting names and cute logos. There have been a few since then. Arguably, most bugs with logos nowadays are just the result of security researchers doing a bit of marketing to try and raise their own profiles. But Heartbleed's had a specific purpose. Heartbleed was felt to be so dangerous by the people who discovered it that they gave it this media-friendly face to try and get the news out. The worry was that so many people were going to be hit by it that they needed to get it into the public's consciousness as quickly as possible. So what was the big deal about Heartbleed? What made it so dangerous? Well, Heartbleed affects TLS. TLS is a cryptographic protocol that underpins the security of most electronic communications today. When you do your online banking, you're using TLS. When you log into Facebook, you're using TLS. When you buy something on Amazon, you're using TLS. You're using TLS right now to watch this video. You may also have heard of SSL, that's just the old name for TLS, they're the same thing. Heartbleed isn't a bug in TLS itself, it's a bug in OpenSSL. That's a software library that happens to be the most widespread implementation of TLS. OpenSSL is free for anyone to use, and a lot of people do. It's a dominant implementation on Linux, and therefore most of the internet. OpenSSL is one of those software libraries that's so widespread, everyone just kind of trusted it. So here's the background. It wasn't the encryption itself that had failed. The heart in Heartbleed refers to the Heartbleed extension for TLS. There's a bit of work that goes on between your computer and the server when it wants to set up an encrypted session. It doesn't make sense to repeat that process every time you want to send data. That would be hugely wasteful. So instead, your computer and the server keep that session open. But how long should they keep that open? There's other people want to use the server, so it needs to know when to close it. In an ideal world, your computer would say goodbye to the server when it was done, and the server would close the session. In the real world, this might not happen. Your computer might crash, you might have a power cut, you might be running some badly written software that forgets to say goodbye. In that case, the server would hang on to the session forever, and over time it would collect more and more of these dead sessions until eventually it would crash under the load of trying to maintain them all. One solution is for the server to start a timer, and if it doesn't hear anything from you by the time the timer runs out, it closes the session. But how long should that timer be set for? Computers consume data in milliseconds, but throw a human into the mix and it can take significantly longer. If you're reading a long article on a website, for example, that could take several minutes. The solution is for your computer to send a little heartbeat message every so often, just to let the server know you're there even if you've got nothing to say. Every time the server receives one of these heartbeat messages, it resets the timer. This little heartbeat message is where things went horribly wrong. We're about to get a little technical here, so bear with me. Everything that happens in a computer happens in memory. Data, programs, anything to be processed, anything that has been processed, at some point it lives in memory. The heartbeat process is quite simple. Your computer sends a message, the server replies with the same message, and in between it lives in memory. A server's memory is a very cluttered place. Space for the heartbeat message gets allocated wherever some space is available. Now that space is not going to be empty. It will contain whatever data was left behind by the previous program that used it. It's ready to be overwritten, but it's not actually blank. Erasing it would be a waste of time when you're going to overwrite it anyway. Now here's the bug. The heartbeat message can be any length up to 64 kilobytes. The first part of the message tells the server how long it is, so the server knows how much space to make available for it. But what if you send a 1 kilobyte message and you tell the server it's actually 64 kilobytes long? That's what Heartbleed does. The problem is that the server allocates a full 64 kilobytes of memory and only overwrites 1 kilobyte of it. Now that would be okay if the server made a note of the discrepancy, but it doesn't. And when it comes time to reply, it looks for the length of the message, and instead of taking the 1 kilobyte it actually received, it takes the 64 kilobyte number that you told it, so it reads 64 kilobytes out of memory and sends it back. Now 1 kilobyte of that data it replied with was your message. What about the other 63 kilobytes? Well, it's whatever the previous program left behind in that memory. It could be anything. It could be program code, it could be data, it could be complete rubbish, or it could be really, really sensitive. There's no way of knowing at this point. Bearing in mind this bug exists in an encryption protocol, and we tend to use encryption when we want to protect something valuable, and you can see the problem. Heartbleed is essentially a lucky dip. It tricks the server into sending you random information from memory. You don't know what you're going to get, but you can keep trying it over and over again until you get something juicy. Take an e-commerce site for example, that information could be someone's username, password, their home address, their credit card number, or even the encryption keys of the server itself. Heartbleed has often been thought of as a Linux problem, because OpenSSL was the dominant TLS library in Linux. Now that by itself is enough reason to worry because a large portion of the public internet runs on Linux. In the corporate world however, it's more common to see Windows servers than Linux servers, and Windows tends to use S-channel rather than OpenSSL. Does that mean corporate servers were safe? No. A lot of servers, Windows or Linux, use load balancers to manage traffic to them, or they use security devices like reverse proxies or web application firewalls. And what do those devices tend to run? You guessed it, Linux. And even if they don't, there's a good chance they're using OpenSSL anyway. It didn't matter what your servers ran, it mattered what the device people connected to first used, because that's where the bug was exploited. Now, websites got a lot of attention here, but bear in mind that TLS is used for a lot of things, not just web servers. It's used for emails, VPNs, firewalls, all were affected. So how did this happen? Well, for such a critical piece of software, OpenSSL was chronically underfunded. It was maintained by a handful of volunteers and it survived off donations totaling about $2,000 per year. Remember that a large portion of the internet runs off this software. The code that contained the Heartbleed bug was submitted by a German PhD student and quickly approved by a British consultant. It was committed at 11:59 PM on the 31st of December 2011. That's 1 minute to midnight on New Year's Eve. Somebody needs to get out more! And that's coming from a guy who makes IT videos in his spare time. Anyway, people got the code in 2012 and it went undiscovered until 2014. The obvious question is, could this happen again? And of course it could, but there is some reason to be hopeful. Heartbleed caused a lot of people to take a much closer look at critical open source projects. Proponents of open source have long claimed that open source software is by nature more secure than traditional closed source software. The theory is that with the code publicly available, everyone can review it, and with loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of people reviewing it, you're going to find and fix a lot more problems. That's more of a belief than a fact though, and it's difficult to prove one way or the other. What Heartbleed clearly proved though, is that just because everyone can review your code, doesn't mean anyone actually will. In fact, there's evidence that Heartbleed was being exploited before it was supposedly discovered, implying that the bad guys did review the code, did find the bug, and then kept it to themselves so they could use it. I mentioned good news, right? Well, this has prompted a lot more critical interest in open source software, and tech giants like Google have started reviewing the code in earnest. Suddenly, funding was available for critical projects like OpenSSL as well. So hopefully we're all in a better place now, and less complacent about the software we use every day. Ultimately though, one human made a mistake, another human missed it, and we got Heartbleed. Could that happen again? Of course, us humans aren't going anywhere, and humans will always make mistakes. So what can you do about it? Well, the simple answer is patch, patch, patch. Keep the systems up to date, keep the bugs at bay. That's it for today, folks. Let me know what you thought of the video, and if you want me to make a series of this and look back at other major vulnerabilities, then drop me a message in the comments. If you made it this far, then hit that like button and go subscribe. If you want to be notified when the next video is out in a couple of weeks' time, use the bell icon. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.